South America may not be the first continent to spring to mind as a pioneer of tramway operation. In the latter part of the 19th century, many parts of South America were rich and prosperous. It also attracted considerable investment from overseas. With electrification, hundreds of tram systems were opened, many being built with British, European and North American capital. The very first animal-powered street railway was built at Santiago, Chile in 1858. 100 years later, US brill-built cars dating from the early 1930s were seen shortly before the city's standard gauge system was closed in February 1959. Separated from the main city network by railway tracks, the isolated, privately owned standard gauge Santiago Weste Railway outlived the city trams, but by 1964 was in a state of advanced decrepitude. Of a dozen cars in the depot, only one seemed operable. The line was just about 2 miles long, dead straight, running for some 20 blocks on roadside reservation. Built in 1904, it had been electrified as late as 1929. Car number 2 had a particularly interesting history. Delivered in 1905 from Falkenried of Hamburg, it had started life as a trailer on the Valparaiso system. Later, it was motorized and equipped with double-bow collectors. Following closure of the Valparaiso system in 1952, it was transferred with a sister car to eke out its last days creaking in every joint on the Santiago Weste shuttle until abandonment sometime in the late 1960s. The broad gauge railway from Santiago to Valparaiso included the oldest section of passenger line in the southern hemisphere, dating from 1855. It had been electrified in 1924. These views, taken 40 years later, feature the impressive Ball and Westinghouse locomotives dating from the 1920s. Batuco, some 20 miles from Santiago, a short branch line was served by a homemade horse-drawn tram. Operated by the Chilean Army, it ran some 3/4 of a mile to a nearby ammunition factory. Despite the presence of overhead wires, electric workings had been banned to prevent sparks causing an explosion. This was probably the only known example in the world of animal power permanently superseding electric traction. The horse tram trundled on until about 1975, thus ending a most unusual operation. The express heading for Valparaiso and the coast was in charge of one of the handsome post-war Baldwin locomotives. Situated on the Pacific, Valparaiso is one of the most British cities in South America and had its first trams as early as 1863. This funicular survives today and is one of 15 incline railways still serving the surrounding hills. Pullman-built trolleybuses had replaced the last trams in 1952. These same vehicles are still in operation today, and one has been preserved in original condition. The British-built meter-gauge Southern Transandean Railway linking Chile and Argentina was only completed in 1910. The Chilean side was electrified in 1927, and the steepest grades, 8% on the Chilean side, 6% on the Argentinian, were rack-operated. The line climbed to over 10,000 feet at the summit tunnel, and on the Argentine side was worked by powerful Kitson-Mayer rack and adhesion locomotives until the end. Unusually for a rack line, the locomotives on both sections pulled rather than pushed, which was safer when bucking snowdrifts. With a break of gauge at either end of the line, it never attracted much freight. It finally closed in 1985, passenger trains having been withdrawn 6 years earlier. The eastern terminus of the railway was at Mendoza, which in 1964 still